So in our last video, we talked about compulsions, rituals, and safety behaviors, and how they're the fuel that make your child's anxiety go up. In this episode, though, we're going to talk about what that means for you as parents, because whether they know it or not, parents get pulled into those rituals. We call that family accommodation. And so this video is all about the ways that parents participate through family accommodation, and the most insidious of all, reassurance seeking.
Welcome back to Raising Resilience, 25 tips for parenting your child with anxiety or OCD. I'm Dr. Josh Spitalnick. I'm the practice owner of Anxiety Specialists of Atlanta. I'm a licensed psychologist, board certified in cognitive behavioral therapy, and I have with me my colleague, Marti Munford, licensed professional counselor, and my co-author to Raising Resilience. In this episode, we're going to be talking about an extension of compulsions, rituals, and safety behaviors, which we talked about in the last episode. But now we're talking about the parents' version of it. Tip 14 is all about family accommodations. And we know, Marti, that almost all parents accommodate. Almost all parents give into things that their kids request of them. But we also know that the research is pretty consistent that 90 to 95% of parents or caregivers of anxious kids family accommodate or engage in or participate in kid rituals.
Sure.
How do we address that?
Well, and not all accommodation is bad, right? I always like to make sure parents don't feel overwhelmed when they start to think about, oh my goodness, I'm doing all these things to help my kid feel calm. Are they all bad, right? We accommodate for a lot of reasons. Certainly, sometimes we are accommodating to help our kid feel calm. Sometimes we're accommodating to keep the ship sailing, right? I mean, there's a lot going on. You might have other kids. You might have a job, you might have basic tasks around your house, and so sometimes the accommodation is about helping things continue to move, right?
This really goes back to some of the other themes about it's okay to not be okay, and what's your parental stress level, what are you modeling? And the reality is we don't want to watch our kids struggle.
Yeah.
So it gets tricky to know, like, when as a parent am I accommodating a behavior I don't want to accommodate, and when am I just being a good parent? How do we differentiate that?
Right, that's a great question, and so that is the challenge that parents always show up in my office with. When do I push my kid and when do I step in and help them, right? And so again, you don't want to think of this blanket of, okay, stop doing everything that makes your kid feel calm, right? Because your life is probably not set up to support that right now. And so what we do in therapy is we really help parents think systematically about, how do I want to reduce some things that are infringing on my own boundaries as a parent, or potentially the boundaries of your other children or other people in the home.
And one of the things that as therapists we will often do is start identifying some of those family accommodations at the outset. List out whether it's in a group format. I know you run a lot of groups for families with kids with anxiety and OCD, or one-on-one. List out what are the family accommodations that we think we're doing from us to child, which goes back to the last episode, knowing what are their compulsions and rituals that are baiting you to give in, identifying them, document them, and start picking one or two that you think is, the low-hanging fruit, the ones you think you can start changing with the most impact right away.
Sure. And I think I hope as a parent watching this, you're starting to see how these things build on each other, right? And so when we talked earlier in a few episodes back about psychoed and how important it is, you can imagine that an accommodation that you've been doing for days, months, potentially years on end, to stop doing that is a huge disruption. If there's not a really great bed of psychoed, that can be really disruptive to the home, right? And so thinking about how are we all getting on the same language and using the same vocabulary so that this transition and this process can feel like it's one that's compassionate and coming out of love and not something that feels punitive.
As you were talking, I was just mindful. Can you see my microphone? Like, is it sticking out too much?
I don't think so.
Are the shadows on my face too much?
No, why?
I'm just. Is this all working out okay?
Oh,
Those are. I got her.
seeking.
Those are reassurance seeking. See how subtle that was? That's how easy reassurance seeking sneaks in. So we're moving to the next tip, which is one of the most insidious of all. I was just sneaking on Marti there, is reassurance seeking. It's typically a verbal transaction, typically between child and you, when they're asking something or expecting you to do something to show them that it's going to be okay, or that it's okay, or that you like something, or that you don't like something. It often starts with questions and you giving the answers. So, how does reassurance seeking really impact the relationship between parent and child? What do we do about it?
Yeah, so reassurance seeking, the biggest challenge is that parents think that the kid is asking for information, right? What time are you gonna come pick me up, right?
Yeah.
It seems like a very basic question, but that's not really what they're asking. They're saying, Mom, Dad, grandparent, can you help me regulate this uncertainty I'm feeling? And that works out great when you can control all the variables, which is almost never, right? So whether it's getting stuck in traffic, finding out another kid, threw up on the playground and you're having to run back to the school to get them, there's so many things that pop up in your day-to-day life that are gonna disrupt the expectation. And so if you're talking about, a kid who maybe isn't struggling with a lot of anxiety, they can usually handle a vague answer, and kids who are anxious often struggle too.
In the last episode, we tried to make it clear that when we say don't do rituals, which we would call ritual prevention, that's not the intervention. The intervention is don't do something. It's instead of doing something, what's something else you can do in place of it, but that also adds value to your life. And I want to make sure that we're being clear that when we say reduce or eliminate family accommodations, which we are, especially in response to reassurance seeking, we're not saying just don't be empathetic or kind to your kid. That's cruel and neglectful. It's doing something in place of that serves a better purpose. And so one of the common questions we get, so you're saying you don't want me to answer the question? Well, no. So you want me to answer the question? No. Those are two options. A middle option is saying or doing something that doesn't actually address the question, but that extends something we talked about last episode, confidence in your child, conveying that they can do it, conveying that you think they know the answer, or that they can go find the answer, or if they don't know who's going to be at the party, what are they going to do about it? So it's not about not answering it. It's definitely not about answering it. It's about giving them other ways to think about that situation without solving the uncertainty principle.
Mm-hmm. And so much of this sits on the idea of building trust with your kid and being consistent in how you deliver some of these messages too. So reassurance seeking is often one of my favorite places to start, because the truth is, repetitive reassurance seeking, question asking, is a really quick way to send a parent into that really dysregulated
Is the microphone looking good now? Are the shadows working again?
You can handle the uncertainty.
Oh, man.
Yeah, you can handle not knowing. Yeah, but that's the truth. Reassurance seeking, it is absolutely the sneakiest of all of these family accommodations / safety behaviors. One of the hardest, I once had a mom call me and she used my own tricks on me. She said, I have good news and bad news. She said, the good news is I can recognize when they're doing something because they're anxious. The bad news is they're telling me they love me, and I don't think it has anything to do with loving me. It's like, well, they do love you, and it seems like they're using that as a form of reassurance. So repetitive saying, I love you, and needing mom or dad to respond back, that's a classic example of reassurance seeking that we see a lot. And as a parent, those are the kind of ones that you don't really want to stop. So you got to find some good systems that work with your family to make sure you guys can show each other you love each other without making it grow anxiety.
Loving your kids is what this is all about. So this whole video series is about, and showing them love and grace is critical. But sometimes the things they're saying and doing, it's not from a place of love.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. This episode really brings us to the point of you as the parent taking more control and being more intentional about how you react to your child's needs. Some of the needs are everyday, boring needs that all kids have, and some of them are more about their own insecurities and uncertainty, and they fall into the category of compulsions and rituals, safety behaviors, and avoidance. When you know that, you can identify them. You can start making some changes in the home with your child's knowledge. You'll see some major changes and some real positive growth between you and your child in that relationship.
If you like this episode, feel free to like and subscribe so you can keep up to date with everything else that we put out on our channel.
Practice owner of anxiety specialist of Atlanta, and I have with blah, 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 blah.
All about you as the parent and how we want you. Okay.
So clean break, and you're gonna say, which is a great segue to tip number. Just waiting for all the noise back there from our crew. Jeez.
Quiet on the set.
Come on. 3, 2.